Welcome, everyone. We're here today for a workshop, part of Indie Design Week. I am Scott Pitkin, and I'll be facilitating the content today. The workshop is titled Building Unbreakable Bonds with Relationship Design. So let's get started. Get started with a little bit about me. I am currently a director of user experience at Salesforce. Usually you can find me in the Salesforce Tower in Indy, but this last year I've been working from home in Bloomington, a little bit south. I have, through my career in design and technology, worked at a number of fairly large companies, so you can see some of those listed to the right. Angie's List locally and also Salesforce, but then Yahoo and Procter & Gamble over in Cincinnati. In all of those different companies, I've really enjoyed building and developing strategies for relationships and working with my teams, helping them think about relationships is just a part of a great way to build, both personal and professional contacts and find success in everything that we're trying to do. So I'm excited to bring some models and some of my experience to share today, and we'll do some activities and things together. Fun fact about me, I've found over 50 four-leaf clovers in my lifetime. So I have many of those pressed in a book here in my office. I think it's a good testament to what I think is one of my superpowers, if you've done that kind of activity before, which is pattern matching. So I think finding a four-leaf clover out of a field of clovers is a good pattern matching kind of superpower. But it also means that I'm kind of staring at the ground maybe a little too much. I don't know. And then, of course, a little bit about my family and our guinea pig Marshmallow. I like to do puzzles, more pattern matching, nature, and kind of a hobbyist with architecture. So there you have the North Christian Church, which is in Columbus, Indiana. Great place to go visit if you haven't seen that or been there to Columbus. So that's a bit about me. And want to start out with just thanking you all for being here. This is a great opportunity, part of Indie Design Week, to come together. Appreciate you being here as a part of this workshop. And I also want to say thank you to Chris Bill, who is a volunteer that's helping me out today and will help us with breakout rooms and a few other things. So as we think about the topic of the workshop, relationships are at the heart of everything that we do. At Salesforce, we started out making something called CRM software, which stands for Customer Relationship Management. And that software was all about connections between sales teams and their customers and forming relationships. So I thought that was interesting as I was thinking about relationships. And that kind of led me to this prompt of how might we build, grow, and sustain our most significant relationships. That could be your personal or professional relationships, but it's so important, and really it's a skill worth kind of investigating. So that's what we'll spend some time doing today. In this workshop, we will take some time to think about people that we know that are in our networks. We'll think about the importance of working with those people, but also some of the challenges that we face working with people or the constraints. And then we'll introduce some models. One of these models is something called relationship design. We'll also talk about a few other things, models to kind of build and grow relationships and do some activities in that area. Here we have a path laid out, kind of an agenda. So after this, we'll start with an icebreaker, get to know our group, get to know using Miro, which is our collaboration space that we use for some activities. Then we'll get into some content about relationship design. Next, we'll do some activities around how we kind of build great relationships and think about maybe a team or a group where you work closely with some people. You'll think about that. So not your whole network, but kind of narrowing in on maybe one specific team or group that's important to you. We'll do a quick breakout as a part of that. And then in section 4, we'll talk about sustainable connections. And this is where we'll just generate some ideas together, again, in breakouts, about how we can sustain our relationships. And that's a great way that we'll tile this back to the theme of the conference, which is sustainability. So hopefully that sounds good to you all. And of course, you'll leave here today with some important things. First, some understanding of some models that I'll cover in the first half of our talk today. We'll talk about circle of influence, relationship design, and some assessment tools. And then we'll cover some methods. We'll do some mind mapping in Miro, so that'll be fun. It's kind of a brainstorming, node-based way of capturing a mind map of a team or a group. There's also some templates that you can take away from today. And then lastly, we'll do that idea generation. We'll kind of brainstorm together some strategies for building and maintaining connections. So that brings us to our icebreaker. So we'll jump into Miro, and the way that we're going to do that is load Miro right here in our Butter connection space. So Chris, do you want to hit the Miro button?
Yep, there we go. You guys should be seeing that. And Scott, I think you are now not presenting, so hopefully that's okay. I think Miro takes over your presenting.
That's perfect.
It's taking a hot second to load on my end. Hopefully y'all are seeing that though.
All right, we see everybody in there. All right, so just to get familiar with what we've got here with the Miro board, you'll see it. You might be loading in a little bit zoomed out, and you can zoom in either using the controls down in the lower right. There's kind of a plus minus to zoom in. And then you can pan around using the hand. Or you can hit your space bar and pan around. Things are kind of organized from left to right. So I'm going to move over to kind of our starting point. And you'll see that we have slides in the Miro board. We have kind of a general area with orange sticky notes. So if you have a note, an insight, a reflection that you want to leave today, you can do that there. And then we have our icebreaker. So if you see some colorful circles, that's where we'll do our icebreaker activity. So I'm going to zoom in on that area. Maybe you can meet me there in the icebreaker area. I'll give people a minute to see if they can find that. If you're having any trouble negotiating Miro, maybe just comment or
shoot us
put it in the chat.
Or come off mute. Yeah.
All right. Hopefully everybody's been able to find here the top of the icebreaker. So the way this works is pretty easy. We're just going to go through a series of questions here, and you can basically hover over the circle that kind of matches how you're feeling or what would be your answer to the question. So we'll get started with how are we doing today? And this is sometimes what we call a red, yellow, green check-in, but you can basically hover over the circle. It could be green, doing great. I'm feeling pretty good today, doing this workshop and meeting you all. If you're kind of in the middle, like things are pretty good, but you know, not bad, not good, you can be there in the middle. And if you're red, honestly, these days, anybody at any time might find themselves a little bit red, but hopefully through this workshop, we'll move a little bit closer to green and we'll have a good time. So, cool. I am grabbing a picture of what that looks like. Great, so hopefully you've got the idea. I'm gonna just move us down a little bit. So our next question kind of deals with people. How much do you interact with people each day? Is it all day, every day, jam-packed calendar full of meetings? Is it depends? Is it rarely? Maybe you're kind of a independent and working alone. Yeah, interesting. We've got some which are all day, some in the middle, one over and rarely. Interesting. All right, let's keep going. So, introvert or extrovert? Of course, this is a spectrum, so you could be far to one side or the other, or maybe in the middle. I'm probably pretty introverted, but as we like to say, I'm an introvert who gets paid to act like an extrovert most of the time. Because I was also in the all day, every day working with people bubble. So that's kind of fun to see where people are. A lot of people kind of in the middle. Excellent. Let's keep going. So another question as we think about the people that we're surrounded by, what size of organization are you part of? So I am a part of a big organization, Salesforce. We have over 50,000 employees now. And I like to categorize this by saying, can I know everyone in my company or in my organization? If the answer is no, it's on the big side. Even when I worked at Angie's List, they had about 2,000 people. And Stephen, I see you on here. You've been there with me. I certainly didn't know all 2,000 people at Angie's List. That was always a kind of a shock to me. It seemed like, I could probably know 2,000 people, but no way. Small, maybe you know most people, and then if you're independent, I'm sure you're still working with people, but there you are. So, interesting. Good distribution. We've had a good distribution for all of these questions so far. Now, one of the last here dealing with people is how many close connections do you have? And you could think about this like maybe your family, close friends, maybe a mentor falls into this, maybe your manager or your boss. So how many close connections do you think? Just take a guess. It's like most people are in the middle, 6 to 10 or 10 to 20. It would be interesting to see if those in large organizations feel like they have more or less close connections. But good to see. Well, thanks for doing that. And then we'll move to the bottom here of the icebreaker. And I've put here a statement of commitment. And although there's nothing specifically that you need to do, because we're talking about relationships, and I think it's important to set some ground rules here, this is an important commitment that I wanted to put out here as a part of our icebreaker, which is to uphold an environment of trust, collaboration, and respect with the material today and with each other, and then maintain confidentiality for what is shared by others in this workshop. So we are going to do a couple breakouts, and it's up to you how much you want to share, but I would just ask that you really maintain confidentiality for anything that somebody else might be sharing in our workshop today. So thanks for thinking about that statement. All right. Well, thanks for the icebreaker. The next thing that we're going to do is a quick intro to Miro. So I'm going to kind of zoom out and move back up to the top of where we started, and then kind of slide over to this next activity, which is called using sticky notes. So sticky notes are kind of a thing that we can do here in Miro. So what I'd ask is that you either grab or duplicate a sticky note. You can probably right-click on a sticky and then hit duplicate, or select a note and hit Command-D if you're on a Mac to duplicate that, and then just drag it over and add a goal that you might have for this workshop today. And I already added one, which is facilitate a great workshop, maybe meet somebody new, maybe learn something that's of interest. And if nothing comes to mind, just drag over a sticky note and say hello to the group. Again, let us know if you're having any issues with negotiating Miro here. All right. And then we're going to slide over one more time once you've added your goal. To something called using mind map. So probably at some point you've heard of doing mind mapping. It's kind of a fun way to brainstorm, but Miro gives us something that is actually a mind map tool. So what I will have you do is basically create a node, and I'm going to just demonstrate this really quickly. I'm going to duplicate something. And when you have one of these nodes, hopefully you can all see what I have here. If you double click on the node and then double click again, you'll highlight the text and you can type your name into the node. And then when you hover on any of these pluses on either side, and you click that, it adds a node. And so what we're going to do is just do a really quick mind map of some favorite fruits or some favorite snacks. So I'm just going to type fruit, and then I'm going to hit the plus on the right side of fruit and add a node. I'm going to say apples, and then I can hit return and say bananas, hit return, and just keep going. Oranges, those are the classics. So you can just move down and grab one of those nodes and then just find a little empty space somewhere and try this out. And yeah, feel free to grab your node and just move it to some space. There's plenty of space if you scroll down. Looks like you're getting the hang of it. One other thing that you can do once you've created some of these nodes, and I'm just scrolling back up here, if you click on a node and then you click and hold, you can move that node around and the lines will just sort of follow it. So you can kind of have some fun by moving the nodes and spacing them out a little bit. Again, if you want to go back and add a node at a different level, like if you wanted to add, let's say, snacks, if you were adding fruits and you wanted to add snacks to the other side of your mind map, you can click on the plus sign on the other side and then add to that. But being able to kind of move these around is somewhat important as you get into the activity that we'll do a little bit later. We're going to use this mind map for a team or a group that you work closely with or that's important to you. It could be a community group, could be a work group or a team, but that'll be in our activity coming up in a little bit. If anybody's having any issues with this, again, let us know. But it looks like generally people are getting the hang of it. I'm seeing some interesting ideas for fruits and favorite fruits. Very good. All right. So that is our intro to our Icebreaker. That's our intro to Miro. I am going to switch back now and move forward with some of the content that we have to share. So, Chris, I don't know, should I just go back to screen sharing and kind of override this with the screen share?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
You might get prompted that you're about to do that, but yeah, just hit yes. So everyone will be taken out of Miro and back to the presentation, but we'll be back to Miro here before too long. There we go.
All right, fantastic. So we're going to go through a few different sections of presentation now. These are really some key concepts about relationship design. And we're going to start with something called circle of influence. So to introduce this, I'm going to begin with a few assertions. And this one may seem pretty obvious, but we live and work with people. And because we're generally social, we create and participate in groups, teams, and communities of all shapes and sizes. So in larger companies, for those of us that are we're in that bubble of the icebreaker, there's lots of different teams that we may interact with. And then for those in smaller or independent situations, maybe there are fewer teams, but you still have many groups. Could be your family, could be a group of friends, activities that you're a part of, lots of different ways that we come together. And when we do, we share common goals. So just broadly speaking, these are some of the things that happen when we come together. We want to make great things happen. We want to feel empowered to do our best work together. We want to find work-life balance, and that's been really important this past year. I think we've all been challenged to do that in different ways. And we want to enjoy partnership and respect as we participate in these different teams and groups that we're part of. So with those collaborations, our success is interdependent. And here I have an example that we call the three-legged stool. And this is sometimes commonly used in product development, where the idea of the stool represents the product, and then the three legs of the stool are some of the different functions that work together and make that stool what it is, make it stand up, make it balanced. So we have product management, engineering, and user experience. And if it's not product development, it could be any number of things where a couple key groups need to work together. And as we think about that, what's fun about this example is if you take any of those legs away and you just have two legs, guess what happens? You're out of balance and the stool's going to tip over. It's going to crash down on its side, and it's going to be not so much of a stool anymore. So the idea in this case is that you need these three groups kind of working together. They're interdependent, and that creates a great product. But in this case, I think there's more to it. I think there are actually other functions, maybe the legal team or the marketing team. Maybe the customers need to be involved, or partners. Plus, our own sense of community, our families, friends, mentors, other community groups that kind of make us whole so that we can contribute what we need to in our function here. So all of these things come together to make this product a success. And when we're doing all of that, when all those groups are coming together, we're collaborating, we're influencing, we're being influenced by others. And that leads us to the circle of influence. So this idea is really pretty straightforward. The rings are all around you. So imagine yourself in the middle. This is actually one of our Salesforce brand characters called Astro that's in the middle of this diagram. But imagine yourself in the middle, and that's kind of the heart of your circle of influence. And then around that, you can imagine these rings in the center being kind of your inner circle, maybe where the strongest influence is happening, either your influence of others or their influence on you. And we've got some other faces kind of scattered around here, some of the little astros representing people that might be in your circle of influence. So then, again, as you're in the center, there's stronger influences, and as you go out to the fringes of the farther circles, those are some of the weaker influences that you may have. And those could still be valuable influences, but they're just maybe more limited or weaker, or not something that you invest as much on a weekly or monthly or yearly basis. So again, we're going to do an activity, not yet, but we will, to set up a mind map of a group that's important to you in your circle, and we'll do some assessment of that and some action planning of that. So keep that in mind as we go through some of the presentation here today. Next, I want to talk about relationship design. So although to some extent this whole workshop is about relationship design, this is actually a specific thing that Salesforce has been working to create. So relationship design at Salesforce is a new discipline that we've been working to develop. It's a creative approach to drive business and social value by thinking about relationships with our customers, within our organization, with employees, and with the communities that are important that we work with. So, what exactly is relationship design? This is something that is kind of like a framework or a set of tools. So we've developed some guidance and some principles to help us think about connecting more deeply with the humanity, the human connection in the work that we're doing. In some ways, it reminds me a little bit of like what a user experience researcher would do, thinking about what are the needs, what are the desires that the people involved in a project really have, and have we taken enough time to understand those needs and connect person to person on what's going on. It's also about a commitment to build trust and co-create. So, not assuming that we have the best answer ourselves, but co-creating with those that may actually be living the experience of the problem that we're trying to solve. And relationship design comes with a set of 4 mindsets, which we'll go into some more detail about. And I think those 4 mindsets are really great to think about, not only from sort of a business standpoint, how to connect and make relationships that matter in a business context, but also in a personal context. So we'll think about that. So this is exactly that. Whereas relationships are something that Salesforce is thinking about to help create value for the company and with the communities and the customers that we serve, ultimately creating business and social value. We're going to today kind of narrow this in and think about relationship design applied to ourselves, to our circles of influence, to success in our work and our lives, and how we create meaningful connections. So I think this framework can really scale as big or as narrow as you want, but what we're doing is we're kind of focusing it in just a little bit more to how it could apply to ourselves. So here are these 4 mindsets. We begin with compassion, intention, reciprocity, and courage. And all of these are things that kind of work together as you're thinking about bringing more humanity into the work, the technology, the business challenges that we all face. So I'll begin with compassion as we look at these in a little bit more detail. So with compassion, the question here is really, how do we create conditions for safety or psychological safety in the relationships that we hold? Psychological safety really is about a feeling of connection and a feeling of trust with another person in that relationship. And when we have that psychological safety with that other person, research shows that we're more likely to extend empathy, and it will encourage trust and loyalty in that relationship. So a foundation of that safety and security in how we're operating with that other person is so important. And it begins with compassion. So what does that mean? Well, it means really understanding that person, really listening deeply to the other person, and hopefully they're giving you the same. They're listening deeply to you and they're extending empathy to you. If we think about how does that show up, how does that look like in practice, here are some things in the slide, like finding common ground with that other person, engaging to understand their real lived experience or challenges, learning from differences and appreciating differences, checking each other's blind spots. They may see something that you're not seeing, or vice versa, and raising those perspectives to the other. And then sharing feedback, giving and receiving feedback is also part of compassion. Next is intention. So just like other goals, we have a better chance of achieving a goal if we define it and we create accountability around it. And so relationships are no different. Relationships grow if we set specific intentions about fostering those relationship goals. And if we make a conscious choice to really invest in the people around us, it can kind of shift those relationships to be more trusted and stronger. So in practice, being intentional with our relationships means setting and being accountable, prioritizing relationship-centered goals, and making decisions that align with your values. So with those relationships, really leading with your values and being intentional about doing things that align with your values. The third mindset we have is reciprocity. So this is about give and take for mutual growth. So when we connect, when we share and understand the needs, the challenges, the obstacles that someone else is dealing with, that's really important. And then we can actually partner with them. We can interact together. And then we need to keep doing that over time because relationships change. They're dynamic. So if we feel like we understand that person today, we may not understand them next week or next month because their situation may change or our situation may change. So this has to be ongoing. That conversation needs to keep going over time. And then we need to work together. So we need to collaborate, we need to co-create, and come together to do that. So what does that look like in practice? Well, it means collaborative problem solving. It means valuing the wisdom of your community and engaging your community in your process and openly sharing. And then last, we have courage. So the fourth mindset of courage. Courage really shows up if we make a mistake, and we all make mistakes, especially in relationships. We sometimes say or do the wrong thing, or we step on someone's toes. But it's how we deal with making that mistake. It's what we say after that determines kind of where we go next. So courage really means communicating, being open, being vulnerable, admitting to a mistake. That's so important. And we can fix those mistakes. We can take steps to acknowledge and then try to repair some of the harm that's been done rather than avoid the situation. That takes courage. It also means speaking up if something isn't quite right, or if we have a concern about something. Having a difficult conversation, providing hard feedback. Those are all things that take courage. And then being open and vulnerable if we don't live up to our values. So earlier we talked about being intentional about trying to set expectations and act in accordance with our values, but we don't always live up to our values. And so it takes courage to acknowledge that and say, I really wanted to be here, but I didn't make it there. So we'll keep trying. We'll keep moving in that direction. And then maybe in your relationship, there are some ideas for doing better the next time, being closer to your values the next time. So there's a lot of great stuff embedded in these mindsets. I'd like to also make a quick plug for a short presentation. There's a lightning talk tomorrow by Lydia Lodovici, who's one of my colleagues at Salesforce. She's going to do another quick talk introducing relationship design, and we'll probably have a little bit different content to share about how relationship design works for business. All right. So our last section of content here before we get into an activity It's called Building Great Relationships. Great relationships. We all probably know it when we've felt it. Relationships that build us up, enable us to be ourselves, provide perspective and feedback. Great relationships are trusted, and they're there for us when we need them. But we also know, this is another assertion, relationships aren't always easy. And despite the fact that they all take work, why are some harder than others? So you all may have thoughts about this. You may have somebody specific that's jumping to mind. But there's a reason for this. There are actually multiple reasons. But it comes down to foundations of safety and trust. And just like we mentioned with relationship design and with compassion, psychological safety, the building of trust as a foundation for any relationship is really, really important. And all of these things shown here are important to feeling that sense of safety in any given relationship. So these things might include feeling seen or acknowledged, feeling valued by the other person, feeling important, or like you're being treated fairly. I have two boys, they're aged 10 and 12, and fairness is everything. You know, every single day something unfair happened, and it's a part of the developmental stage that they're in. But it's so interesting to see what fairness means to them in their world. Feeling confident is important as a foundation, you know, that you can share openly and that those contributions will be heard. Feeling like you have control and feeling like you belong or fit in. And guess what? If any of these things are missing or something happens where one of these things is not working in a given situation, it erodes the feeling of trust and safety. So back to the idea of work, it's hard work to establish and maintain and sustain these foundations of safety and trust. But when they're there, boy, isn't that great. You know, I would want that for everyone to have that with their inner circle. But it's also important to think about these not only from your own perspective, but from their perspective. This is two-way. You know, how do you feel? How do they feel? And if you remember our icebreaker about introversion and extroversion, you might be two introverts and you think the other person doesn't want to talk to you and they think you don't want to talk to them. You might both be so introverted and waiting for the other person to reach out or talk. So you always have to think about the other's perspective. Maybe something you've done has eroded a little bit of the safety in their mind. So regardless of those, we all fall into some sort of spectrum in terms of the relationships that we hold. If the trust and the safety is not there, we might find ourselves kind of at the bottom of this in a more closed or avoiding kind of relationship. But if we move up through a journey toward open and appreciating, then that's probably closer to a great relationship. Again, regardless of where your relationships fall on this line, there's always a chance to move up toward openness and appreciation. And that's kind of a goal that we'll pull into the activities today, to think about who are the people that you're close to, what is the strength of some of those key relationships, and then what are some just small things that you could do to move or shift up the scale a little bit closer to openness and appreciation. So here's a simple model, a way that you can think about the strength of some of your relationships based on these 4 categories. And you need to honestly kind of think about these things, and they're just 4 categories, but some relationships you might feel like are essential. unbreakable. There's enough long-term trust and safety built up. You can weather a lot of challenge and strain on that relationship. There may be others that are strong or healthy. You might have plenty of people that kind of fall into those buckets, but you may also have a lot of people that you would consider weaker or limited, and that could be for a lot of reasons. Maybe you just haven't had much chance to connect with that person. Maybe you're separated from that person by time zones or geography. Maybe you used to work closely with them, but you shifted teams and you just don't see them as much anymore. Maybe they're someone who's in your kind of company organization, like the CEO of a small company who is in your orbit, but it's not somebody that you're close to. You're just not in proximity to talking with them all the time. And then the last category, uneasy or strained relationships. And that's always tough when relationships fall into that category, but inevitably some may. And then that's where our openness to thinking about how we can change the tone or improve some of those relationships becomes important. If we've assessed relationships, we can then set some intentions. So this is something that is a foreshadowing of our activity coming up in just a minute. Once you've thought about a few people, you can then put down some intentions. I'll just use Chris Bill. So Chris and I work together. Put down Chris's name here and say, I need to schedule some time to catch up with Chris. I don't know what he's working on. Our connection has become a little bit weak, a little bit limited, and I'm just going to set some intention to reach out and see how he's doing and maybe see if he wants to do a tennis lesson together. We like to joke about tennis. Great. So now it is time to do an activity. So you've seen this before, but I'm going to, again, jump into Miro, and I'm going to demonstrate a little bit of how we're going to do this. We're going to go through 3 steps kind of on our own individually. And that will include using the mind map to think about a team or a group that's important to you. Then assess some of the people, some of the names, and put those into those categories that we were just talking about. And then work through an action plan for a couple of those people. Now, again, back to privacy. This might be personal. We'll kind of keep it work-related, at least for this prompt. Maybe a team, maybe a work group, maybe a community group that you're close to. But you could always use initials for people if you're not interested in putting actual names, or if it really feels too private to put into the Miro board. This is something you could just contemplate on your own or take a piece of paper at your desk and kind of follow along. So with that, I think went through some of these instructions. So let's shift over to the Miro board. I'll do a quick demo, and then we'll take some time to do the activity.
All right, back to Miro we go.
So once that loads for you, we will zoom in to something called activity template. So it's just to the right of where we were mapping our favorite fruits.
I'm going to pull everyone to me real quick so you can jump over to where I am. Oh, maybe I can't do that actually. Never mind.
All right. So there's something here called activity template. And then there's also an example of what this looks like when it's filled out. But real quick, I will kind of go through what it might look like to fill this out. So I'll start in the center. Whoa. Really zoom in. Oops, I need to get my pointer tool. So what we'll do here is we'll just put a few names. So when I'm thinking about a group that's important to me, I think of a few of my peers that I work closely with. So I will names in. All right, so I'll create 5 names, and then I'll think about where are these names located in my circle of influence. And so I might click on one of those names and kind of move it to the inside. And then a couple of these names I'm going to move out because those are a little weaker in terms of the connections. I'm going to maybe put another person on this side. Okay, so you'll spend a few minutes thinking about some of those names for yourself. And then you'll go over to the part 2, which is assessing, and you'll put a few of those names on sticky notes. Think about that for a few minutes. And then once you've done that and you've done some assessment, the last piece is moving over to the blue section, which is kind of to the right of your workspace, where you'll create an action plan. And this is where you can think about what are some steps that you could take, what are some intentions that you could make with a few of those people that would either improve an already strong relationship or maybe help build a relationship that's weaker or limited, or maybe even one that's uneasy or strained. You can think back to some of the things we were just talking about with relationship design. Maybe there are some things like setting up some time, having lunch, having a virtual lunch with somebody or a virtual breakfast. And if you want to see a full example, you can keep scrolling over. There's another workspace that's called example. And in that case, I've got a few things that I've typed in with different action items in the plan. Maybe setting up a biweekly meeting, creating a reminder to check in with somebody who's new on the team on a weekly basis, visiting somebody in person later this year. So these are all just ideas that I was coming up with for a few people in my network. All right. Any questions on that? So what we're going to do now is we're going to take about 10 minutes to do that activity individually. And what I would have you do is find a workspace, basically claim a workspace, and there are plenty of them. So you can kind of move wherever you want and just sort of look for the cursors so that you can find one that's yours. If you want to put your name at the top, there's a little area for name just kind of above the workspace. And then zoom in and have some fun. So we'll kind of start the clock on about 10 minutes starting now. And let us know if you have any questions or if you're having trouble finding a workspace to do this activity.
All right, I'm going to do 10 minutes. Do you guys want music or not? Let's do some music. Let's do classic.
Yeah, let's do it.
So we're about halfway through, so if you haven't already started moving to assessing and action planning, you could think about that next. All right, we're winding down. All right. Well, hopefully you were able to make your way through some or all of those activity steps. What I'm going to do is scroll up here to slides. So now what we're going to do is a quick breakout. I think we can probably do groups of 3 still.
Do you want me to
And the
set that up?
idea here, yeah, if you could set that up.
Yeah, I'll get it going.
The idea for this breakout is to talk a little bit about maybe some ideas that you had for somebody that's a part of this group that you work with, and share that with the group. So as we go into the breakouts, do quick intros, real quick, 20 seconds each, like your name, what you do, and maybe the context of like what kind of a team or group you were thinking about. And then take turns, just a couple minutes each, describing maybe one or two of the relationships that you were thinking about and steps that you might have to help build and grow that relationship. So really just sharing and getting some ideas from one another about how you're thinking about growing the relationships that matter to you. Without further ado, I guess we'll move into the breakouts.
Sounds good. We'll have 2 groups of 3 and 1 group of 2. And Blake, I saw your comment there. So you'll be in that group of 3. And when you have to duck out, that'll just become a group of 2. All right.
Hello.
Welcome back.
All right. We got sort of trapped in a breakout room.
I was wondering, I was like, Scott, you left me all alone here.
Well, it looks like a few people had to drop off. I think maybe what we'll do in the interest of time is sort of on the fly work together on this last activity that we have. So, Chris, maybe we can load the Miro board one more time.
You got it.
And this activity is meant to be kind of a brainstorm for a few different questions that I have set up. So rather than doing breakouts for this, I think we'll just work together as one group. And as this loads, all right, I think we're back in here. So I'm going to slide over to this last activity. So I hope you all enjoyed that activity for the mind map and a little bit of action planning. It sounds like some people were able to get into the mindset of thinking about this and kind of applying the approach. What is nice about this is, you can kind of take this and do it at whatever size or scope of circle that you want. You could think about it for your personal connections, your work connections. It's just a tool that you have, and I'd encourage you to think about it from time to time and just take stock of the relationships that matter to you in the given moment. But we're going to switch gears, and we will now look at this brainstorm set of prompts. So I'll have you kind of join me. We're going to move down to this first workspace. Zoom out a little bit. So in this workspace, there are basically 3 different sections, and there's a prompt for each. And so what we'll do is maybe just spend a couple minutes on each of these prompts, and then see if anybody wants to share an idea that they came up with. So we'll kind of spend like 2 minutes brainstorming, then maybe 2 minutes with a quick share out if anybody has an idea that they would like to raise to the group. And then we'll move on to the next prompt and kind of move through these 3 topics. Does that sound good to everyone? Mm-hmm. All right. So if you've been able to find this first workspace, our first prompt is, how might we use relationship design to sustain our relationships? So here we're thinking about, again, kind of generally the 4 mindsets of relationship design: compassion, intention, reciprocity, and courage. And we're thinking about not just building and growing, but really sustaining strong relationships. So you can grab a sticky note, you can think about that, and we'll just spend maybe 2 minutes, see if you have ideas that might come to mind on that. All right. Well, hopefully you all have a couple ideas or had a chance to get some thoughts out. Would anyone like to share an idea that they had here for using some of the relationship design mindsets to sustain? And if so, feel free to come off mute.
Well, I'll go ahead. One of the things that I'm actually really enjoying about my workspace is before he left, one of the designers that we used to have at our company started doing a question of the day on Slack, along with some other just kind of social Slack channels that we had, like Look at My Pet channel and stuff like that. And so that's been a good way to get people just to have something to think about and make comments on over the day and respond to each other and just create some interaction between people that's not related to work.
It's a great one. Good old question of the day. I remember the calendars that they used to sell, and maybe they still do, with the little tear-offs of, you know, the word of the day or the question of the day. Anybody else like to share? One that I had was just checking in each meeting, just, you know, a reminder to myself to start the meeting with just a moment or two to see how everyone's doing or how that other person is doing, and connect before we get down to the agenda of the day.
One thing that we started instituting where I work is we now have 3 artists. It was just me and another guy last year, and actually it was me for about 4 months last year by myself. But we have 3 artists now, and one thing that we've instituted is after the sales huddle on Mondays, we do a like more of like a kind of just an art group meeting huddle thing where we can just talk about initiatives and plans and any new ideas that we want to come up with for, you know, trying to strengthen the event mailer business that we're in. So
Nice. Yeah, a little intentional time to come together and work on something sounds great. Well, thanks for sharing. let's move down to the next prompt. So we'll scroll to this one with the blue sticky notes. So this one is kind of about how do we build and grow relationships during a pandemic, or even if we're just working remotely, or when we're working with a distributed team. Certainly during the pandemic, it's changed things. We're all working through screens, but maybe you have some ideas about how you've continued to connect with people. All right, anybody want to share an idea here? Of course, you're welcome to just read the stickies, but anybody have one that they'd like to share to the group?
So one of the things that's worked well for us, and I think I saw another sticky there related, is virtual game team time, like an hour every Friday of just hanging out, picking a game online and playing it. We use Jackbox, we've used like Among Us, Board Game Arena, all sorts of stuff. That's been really fun.
Yeah, I'm missing Board Game Arena Day today because I'm doing this instead this week.
I've got to check that out. I haven't heard of that before.
It's pretty fun.
Yeah, sometime last year, yeah, we had a past coworker that he would do online games with Jackbox games too. And interestingly enough, he's now at Salesforce actually. He's a I don't know what the pronunciation is, Pardot or Pardo engineer, but that's what he does there now. So yeah, I think he had kind of like a weird like freelance layoff kind of thing, and then he really grinded on the Trailhead platform and skilled up to do Pardo. So.
Thanks.
Well, we're down to about 2 minutes left, and this is our last activity. So I'm just going to push us along, and we'll spend 1 more minute and just add a few ideas to our last prompt, which is how might we scale our circle of influence to be more inclusive and bring more diverse perspectives to our work. So basically, if you think about who could bring a more unique perspective to any given challenge that you might face in your work or your life, how can you kind of open up to bring in some different ideas and expand the perspectives that you're thinking about? So I'll just read a couple of these, but we've got ask others not on team for input, feedback, help create a culture of inclusion and belonging, use a Slack plugin called Coffee Chat or something like that, which pairs you with random people to meet up with. Be aware of potential biases you might have when hiring. Start a social committee, start conversations with people, engage someone from another function to get fresh eyes on something. Have a company-wide social Slack channel, or hiring more diverse minds on the team. In the meantime, connect with those from other departments. Yeah, great ideas. These are all great ways to get started, just expanding that set of perspectives that we all need to move forward. Well, thank you so much for joining today. I'm going to share my screen one more time, just for a wrap-up slide here. So, to recap, we have reflected on a group that's important to us, mapped it, assessed it, and done some planning. Learned about relationship design and some other models for how to think about growing key relationships. And here at the end, we've gathered some ideas for applying relationship design and meeting some of the challenges of sustaining and scaling our important relationships. I want to thank everybody for joining today. I hope this was valuable, and I hope, just based on our initial icebreaker, you've enjoyed it and it's moved you a little bit more positive in terms of how your day is going. There are some relationship design resources. I realize these links are on a screen that you can't click right now, but we can follow up and put these into the Miro board as clickable links. But basically, if you search on Salesforce for relationship design, there are a whole bunch of blog posts. And at the bottom, a trailhead, which is a free online learning module where you can learn more about relationship design. You can also follow up with me if you're interested in those links. I'd be happy to share them directly. So thank you.
And thank you, Scott. I'll also just plug real quick before you guys jump out. We have a workshop feedback Google form. Love for you to fill that out if you get a chance. It'd be awesome.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.